encouraged.
Could we get some coffee here, please?
Damn good coffee and hot, I gotta say. I'm already saying it. Because it's damn good coffee and hot. Damn good coffee and hot. Go ahead, say
Damn good coffee and hot.
That's what I just said. It is damn good coffee and it's hot. And welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen, people of Earth. Today is Thursday, September 1st, 2022. Are you excited for September? What is your favorite September song? Is it Earth, Wind, and Fire September? Is it See You in September? Is it Wake Me Up When September Ends? Is it Try to Remember the Kind of September from the Fantastics? Jerry Orbach. Whatever it is, it's fucking annoying. Enough already. First day of a new month. Here we are, September. Here's to you, September. Get the fuck out. I'm sorry. We're going to skip over some comedy today to get to some world news. Michael Hilliard will be my guest today, and we're going to be talking serious shit. But Michael's got a sense of humor about this stuff. So, anyway, that's what's on tap for today. The coffee is good. It is September. I just want to, a little public service announcement here, remind people not to electrocute yourself, okay? Because you don't want 100, here anyway, in the United States, you don't want 110 volts just screaming through your body, as I had last night. Of course, if I were in the UK, it would probably be 220 volts, which would be even worse, I think. It's not a good thing. It's a very painful. Feels like you're about to die quickly. And if you're lucky, you will break the connection and not continue that. If you're lucky. Now, some people not so lucky. Anyway, the point is, don't stick your hand anywhere near a live wire if you can avoid it. That's my public service announcement for today. So if I seem a little off, it's because, and listen, I seem a little off every day, so how could you tell? I'm always off. Never been on. So you really probably can't tell if I'm off. But I feel a little off because I almost died last night. Almost electrocuted myself. Almost gave myself the chair. Electrocution. Anyway, Michael Hilliard will be here 9:30-ish today. Around there. Michael's in Australia, down under. So I'm wondering, what is that for him? That's like middle of the night, 1 o'clock. No, not 1 o'clock tomorrow morning? I don't know. Or is tomorrow night? Wait, what is it there? It's Friday? I don't know what time it is. Does anybody really know what time it is? This is why we got to get rid of time zones and everything and just call it now. Everything is now. When is it? Now? Okay. When are we doing it? Now. All right. I told you, you don't want to electrocute yourself. Anyway, the coffee is damn good and hot. I missed the trash man this morning, probably because I electrocuted myself last night. I'm blaming everything on electrocuting myself last night. So anything I get wrong today is because I electrocuted myself last night. Good morning, people in the chat room. Let me see who's over there. There's people there. There's humans there. Dean and Jamie. Jamie and Kelly and William and everybody. What's kind of hard to schedule for now? What is that? kind of hard to schedule for now. What? You mean electrocuting yourself? Uh, no, I don't think you would love to electrocute yourself, William. Believe me. Done it a number of times, never on purpose, of course. And it sounds like you want to do it on purpose, but no, there's better way. If you want to hurt yourself, or if you want to end it all, even there's so many better ways of doing it. Now, but the truth is, you probably can't kill yourself. Well, nah, that's not true. That's not true. I see. I'm blaming this on the electrocution now that I'm getting this wrong. But it's really difficult to electrocute yourself on purpose. It really is. Because your instinct, once you get that zap, is to let go of whatever you uh and then you basically having a heart attack and all that kind of stuff. What happened with me was still working on the equipment issues here in the studio, reaching for a plug that was on the floor, buried behind something underneath. I'm laying on my belly on the floor like a reptile. I'm reaching behind something and just held both prongs together while it was still plugged in. And my goodness, oh my goodness, it was shocking. It was shocking. Yes, it was. Anyway, so are you in the mood for some real hard news around the world? Michael Hilliard telling us what's going on in Pakistan, what's going on in Afghanistan, what's going on with your friend named Stan, what's electrocution Stan. That's what I want to talk about. Anyway, we'll find out. I'm sure we'll have some interesting stories for us to kind of say, wow, the world is coming to an end. Last night in the United States of America, my hometown, fucking retarded today. Uh, it's an electrocution. I swear to God, I did not eat an edible. If that's what you're thinking, I wish I would have. Send me your edibles, and I will eat them. Um, there was an election in Alaska, um, also known as Russia Minor, Russia Minor. Sarah Palin, you remember her, don't you? She lost. She lost an election last night in a state that is not very red. Red. It's red. It's kind of like Colorado, Alaska. Similar mountain snow, purplish. They got a lot. See, the thing with Alaska is a lot of rough outdoors people, as you would imagine. Bears. People like to wrestle bears and shit. Um, but they also got a lot of ass fucking going on up there. Because let's face it, when there are more men than women, when men severely outnumber women, there's going to be some ass fucking going on. Prison, Alaska, pirate ships, stuff like that. There will be ass fucking. So it's a gay state, but a Republican state. But Republicans don't like gay people, so they're all confused and not sure what they want. I mean, we don't want to outlaw ass fucking, do we? I personally, I don't ass fuck myself, so it wouldn't bother me. And it's not necessarily a gay thing, or it's a hetero thing for me. I'm just not an ass fucker. I don't like ass. And that has nothing to do with being electrocuted, by the way. I hated ass long before I ever got electrocuted. I grew up hating ass. I come from a long line of ass haters. Ass is, they get it's an exit only type of thing. Where how did I get on ass? Oh, because Alaska, they love ass up there. But they're also Republican and they're conflicted. Do we want guns and anti-abortion stuff, or do we want to maintain the ass fucking? Well, I just don't know. I mean, they love ass. Ass is their favorite fruit. It's the only fruit that grows in Alaska, by the way, is ass fruit. I think I really need to go back to bed. You know, the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning is when I'm going to take my first nap of the day. This is my first thought every day when I wake up. It's like, I'm awake. When can I go back to sleep? Um, that's pretty much, uh, yeah. And William's talking about back in the day. Back in the day. Oh, it's always back in the day. It was never back in the night. Back in my acid days. Oh, I would hook myself up to a battery charger. Well, acid, battery, acid, it all works out. Batteries, no, yeah, battery charger, blah blah blah. Yeah, no, what you want to do that won't kill you, and basically that's not that's not being purely grounded and having 110 volts run through you like you are a conductor for it. It's a whole different experience. I've done the battery not on purpose like you seem to have done, but it's not the same as that 110 volts go through you, stop your heart, make your hair jump right out. No, that's what happened to me. That's my excuse. That's what I'm sticking with. On a fairly regular basis, he did that. Anyway, so that's one kind of electrocution. Now, my buddy Leo, no longer with us, and maybe what I'm about to tell you had a lot to do with that. We, we used to do a lot of radio stuff back in the day, and a lot of radio stuff. And he would climb towers, working on transformers and stuff, and was struck by lightning. You know, they say lightning never strikes twice in the same place. Well, Leo's ass was proof that that's not true. And I based a lot of Hank Porter stories on Leo because that's what I did in the day. But Leo was zapped in the ass with lightning. I want to say 3 times, maybe 4. And he fell off towers. Like every time he gets zapped, he gets struck by lightning and fall a long way, crash through roofs. As I mentioned, he's no longer with us. He's been gone about 10 years. And I do think the number of electrocutions and I love Will. He was my best friend. But the number of electrocutions definitely played a part in his early demise. Put it that way. Um, so I don't know. Don't get electrocuted is the motto of the day, the message of the day. It's what I'm trying to say, folks. It's what I'm trying to say to you. Do not get electrocuted. I was talking about Sarah Palin losing last night. Now, she was a Trumper. He's a Trumper. Trump endorsed candidate. Now and he loved her. She loved him. You know, by golly, gotcha, betcha you. Sarah Palin with the pigs on. Jamie would like her. She was known for lipstick on a pig. I don't know why that came into her campaign stuff back in the day when she was running for vice president. Lipstick on a pig. I don't know where that was part of her shtick, and I don't remember how it fit in there. Anyway, she was a Trumper, and she lost. Now Trump has been loving her, thinking she was going to win, and he could take credit for it, and then she lost. And now it will be interesting to see just how many times he can roll a bus over her backwards, forwards, sideways, just like she ran a terrible campaign. It's all her fault. She sucks. Blah 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 blah. Now, here's what my electrocuted brain wants to tell you this morning. What the fuck is wrong with me? I need more coffee. They have a new voting system in Alaska called ranked choice. I don't really have a full grasp on it. But here's the way it works. And it makes very little sense to me, and I don't know why they would do this. What's the benefit of it? You got all these candidates running, right? And you put them in order. You go into the voting booth and you put them in order. So let's just say William Conway, Jamie Dykes, and Dean are running for office. I put them in order of my choices, how I would rank them. So I would rank I don't know, out of those three. That's a difficult one. I'd rank them all last. No, let's say I rank William Conway first, Jamie second, and Dean third. Now you go in and basically they look at whoever got the most number one rankings. If they have more than 50%, even just a hair more than 50%, they're declared the winner. If they don't have 50%, they eliminate the bottom guy. In this case, the bottom guy would be Dean. Sorry, Dean, we're getting rid of you. And they run the whole thing over again until somebody gets more than 50%. It's a really convoluted way of voting. Why not just keep voting? Always worked when choose the guy you want, choose the person you want. What's the problem with that? The problem with, I think, on a national level is the Electoral College. I'm all for one person, one vote. Fuck this whole idea about having you vote and then other people have to say, well, okay, we'll vote for you, even though your vote is just telling basically electors how you want them to vote for you, and they don't have to. They're not bound by it. That system sucks, and the idea that's where we get red states and blue states from. But this whole idea about ranked choice and just running it through. Yeah, where would it be? I want my guy first. Everybody else, fuck them. They're not on the ballot to me. What's this ranked choice? Like I would if I had to vote. And and God, I hope it's not this. But let's just say for president, it's Donald Trump and Joe Biden. I would rank Biden first, and then reluctantly, with my head up my ass, rank Biden first. And I wouldn't want to rank Trump second. I wouldn't want to rank Trump at all. He doesn't deserve a ranking. So don't give me this rank stuff. I would probably put Biden, or actually, I probably wouldn't even put Biden. I'd put anybody who's running independent, unless they're like a hardcore libertarian or something. Then I would take like the Green Party, and I'd take the horseshit party, who's ever on that ticket, and I'd rank them all. And but I don't want to put Trump or any like hardcore libertarian on my rankings at all. But they force you to do that. Like, no, that doesn't make any sense. So, you follow me here or not? Because I have brain damage from being electrocuted. I want to just remind you of that. So if you're having difficulty following me, just understand I'm having difficulty following myself. So Sarah Palin lost under that new system in Alaska that they have ranked choice. And of course, immediately upon losing, well, ranked choice is rigged, and it's the election was rigged. Every time a Republican loses an election now, it was rigged. And they're always going to have that as an excuse. Well, it was rigged. Well, we lost, but it was rigged. Yeah, that shit gets old and tired, but it's going to be the new normal. It is the new normal. It's the way things are going to be here. So there's that. What else is going on in the world today? You know what? People are. This is how culturally unhip I am. People are bitching and moaning about celebrity breakups, about people wanting some actor, and I don't know who it is because I don't know who is the biggest movie star in the world, but this is the way people phrase it. Why are people so concerned about the biggest movie star in the world should settle down and get married and, I don't know, take a job in accounting or something? Whatever they're saying makes no sense to me. And I'm talking about Twitter, of course, where I'm reading tweets about people who are upset about some movie star's relationship and not having a relationship. Like, what the fuck? Don't you have enough shit in your own life to worry about that you got to worry about other people's boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives, whatever? Isn't it hard enough to keep your own life together? Say yes. Say yes with me. I'm reading some of these comments again. William says he was absolutely insane back then. I had zapped myself with a light socket fresh out of the shower. That was a tough shot. No, I would definitely say that that qualifies as absolutely insane. Uh, so yeah, yes, you're absolutely insane. You probably still are. Probably did something really bad neurological damage to you, and you probably still have a couple of screws loose, without a doubt. Um, what else is going on here? I forgot what else I wanted to talk about. Do you know who Dave is? I don't know about Dave. I know a lot of Daves. Don't get me wrong. Well, Dave is my number one guy. Dave Cobb. I love Dave Cobb. Best drummer in the world. Great bass player, too. He's a great drummer, great bass player. And I think he hates me. That just came out of nowhere. I do think he hates me. Dave was he's not dead yet, but he's a very sensitive guy. But that's one Dave, and then I got Davy Boy out in L.A. My Davy Boy, my little Davy Boy. Look what they did to my little Davy Boy. He's now a production assistant out in Hollywood. Hollyweird. I got lots of Daves. I love my Daves, but I don't know who Dave is. Dave, rest in peace, Dave. Is trending on Twitter, and I don't know who the fuck Dave is. Everybody loves Dave. Dave. I don't know anything about Dave. Do you know Dave? This is sometimes being culturally unhip makes me feel disconnected from the planet because people are so tuned into pop culture and all this stuff. I feel like why don't I care about this stuff? Does that make me strange? Yes. But I deserve love too, even though I don't know who Dave is. I really when's my first nap? I definitely have a nap coming up. 2 years ago today, speaking of Trump, he gave a speech in front of a sign. I don't know why. It's Napo. It's a Napo behind him. Yeah, Napo. I don't know. I still to this day don't know and understand what that was about. He was giving a little speech sitting at a desk with a sign that said Napo with the American flag, like kind of gradiently overlaid on the Napo sign. I'm not making this up. I don't know what that was about. I have no idea. Like, who the hell is Napo? Not me. I mean, I am, but I'm not me. That wasn't me. That wasn't the Napo that I wanted to be. Or I don't want it to be because I don't want to be associated with Trump in any way. Am I making sense? No. You know what it is? I probably need more coffee. That's probably my excuse. And electrocution and more coffee. Maybe I could use another zap to reverse this shit. Now, when I saw Billy Wayne, and I'm not gonna give away any of his material because I'm not. I doubt he's gonna be using this stuff again, and I'm not doing his material here. But he was talking about shock away the gay, shock away the gay. This is what. No, it's not fucking joking, man. I don't know why I'm laughing at it because they actually believe this. It goes back to and David Matterich, who another Dave, R.I.P. Dave, who was a makeup artist when I was back in the hair and beauty industry. He was obsessed with the Bachman family. Michelle Bachman, remember her? And her husband. And her husband was a therapist. using Shock Away the Gay, using shock therapy for gay people. Basically doing what I did last night was electrocuting people. I electrocuted myself, but they would do it purposely to people who were gay, thinking that would make them straight. And how I got on this tangent. But so the idea that Billy put out there, well, if you could shock the gay out of somebody, you could shock that gay right back in. If electricity is what's making the gay in and making you gay or not gay, the gay going in and out. Damn it, I'm fucking crazy. You could shock the gay right the fuck back in. Now, I don't think I shocked any gay into me last night. I certainly didn't shock any gay out of me last night. But I'm thinking maybe another shock might get me back in focus and just stop giggling about stupid shit I'm saying as if I'm saying anything really funny. I'm not. I didn't say anything funny. I just laugh at something that's not funny. Why? It's just shocking, I tell you. Shocking. Anyway. So, Michelle Bachmann and her husband shock away the gay. Now, they still believe in that. The Republican Party and people in the Midwest there, what is it? Minneapolis is where their clinic was. Somewhere in Minnesota, somewhere in Minnesota, maybe St. Paul. They're still doing the shock away the gay stuff. They still believe in that. I believe Pence is big on the shock away the gay stuff. Mike Pence. And I was thinking about Pence last night. This is where I think the electrocution makes these weird synapse connections in here. As I go from electrocution to Mike Pence to shocking away the gay to Mike Pence and Sammy the Bull Gravano. I want to write a piece about Mike Pence and Sammy the Bull. Why? I should go shock myself and remind myself why. Oh, no, I know why. Because Sammy the Bull was known as a rat. He ratted out John Gotti. He testified against Gotti. And he's known as a rat for doing it. But he only did that when he heard the tapes of Gotti suggesting that maybe it's time to get rid of Sammy. In other words, he heard Gotti saying, whack Sammy, kill Sammy. And that's when he turned on him. Now, to me, that does not make you a rat. If you know a guy's going to kill you, guy you've been loyal to, it's just turned his loyalty, he does no loyalty for you and was going to have you whacked. It's not being a rat to turn state's witness on a guy who's going to have you killed. So that's what made Sammy Bull turn on Gotti. Mike Pence went through sort of the same thing with Donald Trump on January 6th when he realized Trump was willing to have him killed. This is your mob leader planning your execution. And he still doesn't turn on him. So does that make Mike Pence better or worse than Sammy the Bull? Does it make him better or worse? The fact that he did not turn state's evidence or hasn't yet. He might testify before January 6th committee. But it's just curious. Like, what's your opinion on that? Does it make him more noble or less noble, knowing that his mob boss was going to kill him, or ready to kill him, have him killed, not do it himself, and still not willing to turn state's evidence on him? Curious thing. You could beat him to the punch, William says. Well, that would be really hard to do. And even in Sammy's case, because Sammy was already arrested at the time. So he's in police custody when the FBI played him the tapes about Gotti wanting to have him whacked. So, no, I don't think he could beat him to the punch. And, mob bosses were not that easy to take out. Now they did together. They did Paul Castellano, but that wasn't an easy thing. And they weren't. They were kind of around the block watching and waiting while the guys did it. And those guys who were doing it, if they would have got whacked, no big loss. That's part of the job. That's what you get paid to do. Anyway, are you ready for some world news now? World news now. I don't have a bumper for this. I should have had a bumper prepared for this, but since I don't have a bumper prepared for this, I'm just going to run with dog news. Dog news. There we go. Michael, welcome in. Michael Hilliard is one of the three hosts of the Red Line podcast and a frequent contributor to this program with the scoop on what's going on in the world, because all we care about is America here, and I like to remind people that there are things going on beyond our border. Michael, welcome.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here again.
Yeah. Where what now? I was trying to figure out what time is it. You're in Australia now, right?
I am in Australia, so it's only 9:30 at night at the moment, so nice and early for me. I've still got quite a few hours to go.
Thursday night, or yeah, it's
Thursday night. Thursday night. It all just blows into one.
It's hard to keep track. That's not bad. It's only 12 hours difference. Okay.
Yeah.
So before we talk about Pakistan and everything else that's going on in the world, United States, let's just get this off the table so we don't have to talk about it. You're obviously aware of what's going on here. Do you think Trump will be indicted? And what is the feeling in places around the world that are not the United States about what's going on over here?
It's really interesting. So there's kind of a few dynamics here, and usually I don't weigh into US domestic politics, but the indictments, it looks more and more like he did do it. But that's obviously a question to what, does the Justice Department prosecute? If they do, if they don't, we'll start with that. It effectively gives a green light to anyone who wants to go down this road. And it is a really tough one for Merrick Garland, because even if he was to go convict and prove, there's with the way the media landscape is, I think there's a lot of Republicans who would still not believe it or refuse to accept it or would just deny it. And then you end up with them having even less faith in the government and any less faith in even just the basic institutions of the country. If they do, if they don't convict him, then, Ron DeSantis, Tom Cotton, whoever's running in, or, President Tucker Carlson in 2028 would be, I know, right? That would be, they would have free reign going, look, the precedent has been set, political candidates cannot be touched because it would be worrying of inflaming the situation. And it means that pretty much if you're running for office, you can get away with anything, which is a really dangerous precedent to set. So it's a real toughie to sort of decide how the Justice Department should go. And either way, it's going to just inflame the situation. If he can not run because of a technicality, I think there's a lot of Republicans who would like to see that. But if he can run, then that's a whole other kettle of fish as well.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the word conviction. I don't think it's possible for them to get a fair trial. So I think indictment is the end goal, because once you indict him and say, okay, we have the intent to charge him, that's where it ends, because there's no place in America where he could get a fair trial.
No, and that's the trouble. I mean, who is actually going to convict him? Because if it's the Supreme Court, not a chance. The Supreme Court will let him off. If it's the Senate, not a chance. If it's the House, then the Republicans are very likely to take the House in the midterms coming up. So even if he'd have to maybe get done in state charges in the New York Ninth Circuit, maybe, and that's it's very difficult to know where the legal precedent sits. But again, it's even if New York charges him, then the government has to do something, and it will force the US government to sit in this position of either actually following the letter of the law and going after him and really inflaming the situation. How people in Louisiana are going to feel about a New York state judge taking away Trump, or they don't do anything and then just show that they're completely toothless. It's a really rough, bad situation either way.
I can't imagine a jury selection where you go through 320 million people looking for 12 that don't have an opinion about Donald Trump.
Yeah, wherever you go in the world, everyone has an opinion about him.
Yeah, right.
You can go to the backest bits of places where there's barely running water, and they'll know who he is, and they'll have an opinion of him.
Right. One more thing about American politics, and then we'll move on. Last night, we in Alaska, there was an election.
I was watching that. Yep.
Ranked choice, and I was trying to figure out what the benefit. I know about, and I was trying to explain it to my audience before you got here. But I was electrocuted last night. This is my excuse for not really being very clear about things.
Shocking.
But is there any other place in the world where ranked choice is used that you know of?
A huge amount of countries in the world use ranked choice. Australia does, for instance.
What's the benefit? Why? Because
hugely beneficial. So let's take two examples of Australia and the UK. So the UK is multi-party democracy, but with first past the post, and Australia is multi-party democracy, but with ranked choice. So with the UK, you have, let's say, the Conservatives and the Lib Dems, which are kind of centrists. You have Labour, which is left, and you have Greens, which is left of left. So what happens is the Conservatives, the Tories, are really the only right-wing party in most seats, because the far-right party don't run against the Tories. The Tories only get 30% of the vote. That's it, like 30, 40, depending on the district. And because of it, but the left, all the guys who hate the Tories are split amongst the Lib Dems, who take like 20, and Labour takes like 30, and the Greens take 6. So you end up with, because all these votes, everyone's got like 32%, 28%, 22%, 10%, 12%. Yes, the Tories win because they technically had the most vote, but only 32% of the actual district voted for them, which means that you've just upset 68% of the district, having someone in that they really didn't want. Whereas in Australia, you rank your choices 1 to 10, or 1 to 6, or 1 to 10, or whatever, however many people are running in that particular district. And let's say if I go, hey, I'm going to vote for the Greens, but if the Greens don't get it, because I don't think they will, I'd like Labour to get my vote. That's great, because even if my first choice doesn't get in, my second choice gets my vote. I'm kind of happy with that. If he's number 2 on that ballot, he's a very acceptable candidate to me.
All right, good point.
So that's the trouble. You get a lot of elections where people may not get exactly what they want, but they can get, you can still make a state. You can even get someone you like or even accept. And as well, even in the US, where effectively it's, most districts are either uncontested or just, exactly who's going to win. We have that in Australia. That's very common, where a lot of seats are very, very solidly, Labor or Liberal or whoever they are. But because of that first preference vote, let's say if you are living in my seat, for instance, the Greens, so the left party, get quite a lot of the primary vote. Labor still wins due to ranked choice, but they get a lot of the primary vote. But it actually gives people a voice, and we can, a candidate can look at that and go, wow, the electorate's, the Greens got a lot more votes this particular election. Obviously, electorate's going to the left, rather than just straight down the barrel, Labor, Liberal. It doesn't really tell you that much about what's actually going on inside your constituency.
Are you compelled to have everybody included in your ranking? Because I can't imagine, like, I'd probably put everybody on the planet before Donald Trump if I had to if there were a ranking. So the question is, are you compelled to do you have to include everybody?
So you don't have to. You can literally just write 1, and then that's it.
Okay.
You can write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 if you wanted to. But it is somewhat satisfying to write, 10 next to the candidate you really, really don't like.
Yeah. Okay. No, that was my concern. Is like I don't want him get. There are people, and I'm just using Trump, but there are people I would not want any consideration for, and just even ranking them 10th would bother me. Like that gives them a chance.
But by the time you get to 10th, because effectively how it works is you have let's say we have all these candidates, whether it be a Bernie Sanders, a Trump, a Kamala Harris, or Ron DeSantis, and all that kind of 10 candidates. And you love Bernie Sanders. You absolutely love him to bits. So you put him as number 1. And then number 2, you go, well, I really like Pete Buttigieg. And number 3, you go kind of down the line there. If effectively everyone gets their votes and everyone goes, okay, has anyone got 50%? Nope, no one's got 50%. So they take the effectively the bottom piles and then go and distribute them over, okay, well, this bottom pile, well, this guy voted for DeSantis, he goes on the DeSantis pile. This one, he voted for Trump, he goes on the Trump pile. This one voted for Bird. And you keep doing that until someone crosses the 50% threshold. And because of that, you end up, your guys down the bottom who you actually ranked 10 don't matter at all. Like you would be never, ever, you're going to have to actually, who you ranked 10 is going to matter. But your guys you rank 1, 2, and 3 are really important because quite often, we see in this election we had in Australia that, if the contest is between, really far left and really far right, rather than having this sort of like where there's locked in 30% of people rock up to vote and that's it. You had sort of, they support, but the left go, well, if my guy doesn't get in, I'd rather the center left. And you have the center, you form these nice little like people who are acceptable. So yeah, 100%. If ranked choice voting is the thing that the United States needs, and it would solve so many problems with the way the system works.
There is very little faith in the electoral process here and now because everybody in the Republican Party is following Donald Trump's example of when I lose, just say it was rigged and they're cheating.
But again, that's actually part of the US system built in. So the problem with the US is that out of, let's say, the House of Representatives, only like around 50 seats in the entire House of Reps are competitive. Right. You go to somewhere like Louisiana and you get these plus 24 seats that are plus red 24 or plus, blue 18. So, the other side won't even run a candidate because it's just a waste of money.
Right.
You're not going to ever win that seat. So pretty much whoever gets the R next to their name in that seat, that's the member of Congress. But when you go to primaries and vote, so particularly Republican primaries, where they are closed primaries, you are only being voted on by an incredibly small amount of your population. So let's say it's not unusual to have sort of 90 to 900 votes or even just 1,000 votes. And these are only diehard Republicans. And let's take an example like the border wall, for instance. And nationally, if you poll national averages, the border wall has like a 32% approval rating. It's really low. But amongst Republicans, it has an approval rating in the sort of 80s, 85s. So if you were to go run in the Republican primary and say, I'm a reasonable person, I'm sure most of the electorate will like me, I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'm a principled conservative, you're never going to win that primary because the only vote you need to win is that small room of 1,000 people, and all of them are diehard Republicans, and all of them vote very differently to the entire population. Right. So you have to end up caving and only appealing to those 1,000 Republicans in the first place to then run in the final election, to which you mostly run uncontested.
Right. So there's the rest of the world looking at the U.S. Like they're done, like. we don't matter anymore, or do we matter more now because we are making the world a less safer place by being unstable?
It's an interesting kind of kettle of fish. Obviously the US is still the primary military power and the primary superpower, and there are still a lot of faith in the US amongst the world. You ask Ukraine where all those weapons are coming from, they know it's the United States that's giving those weapons. But you are finding, particularly when Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, that it really did shake a lot of the diplomatic corps. So you find a lot of, when you speak to diplomats, and on the show we're speaking to presidents and diplomats and all these kind of people all the time, that they go, yeah, look, we're happy, we love the US, we're happy with the current administration, it's great, but we also know there's a midterm coming up, so why would we sign a 10-year deal? If we know that we can sign a deal with the US, but the next administration, when it is Ron DeSantis or it is Trump again, or it is Tucker Carlson, will just tear that deal up. So it means that any deal done with the US now has this kind of like, well, I'm going to sign it, but I don't know if it'll last more than 2 years. Whereas doing deals with the European Union or doing deals with China or doing deals with, other countries, you kind of go, yeah, they're going to be fine. That deal's going to last 20 years. And that will affect US diplomacy for a while going forward.
Right. You mentioned Ukraine. Let's move on to there. I want to talk about Pakistan because that's your latest episode on the Redline podcast. Everybody go there and sign up today. Subscribe for the Redline podcast. If you're interested in world news, sign up today. Pakistan is an interesting thing, and I want to know about that. But Ukraine, I think the last time you were here, the war was like, I don't know, about a month into progress, and I was predicting a very long war. Doesn't seem like that my prediction has changed on that. Doesn't seem like, because here and probably everywhere in the world, the news cycle for mainstream news that comes to you. It's a hot button topic one day and forgotten the next day. Last night, the CEO of Lukoil just happened to fall out of a hospital window. He was the one guy in Russia, one of the ones who was happened to be against the Ukraine war, and he accidentally fell out of a hospital window and found himself dead. So what's going on with Ukraine? Is it still like it's going to be a Vietnam for them?
It's really interesting. So the Ukraine is it's really hard to predict on what exactly is going to happen, because obviously it's we can't predict how well certain offensives are going to go or what the resolve of other countries are. But it seems that there's two real big sort of front runner scenarios of what's coming up. One is the sort of successful Russian scenario, is that they make a big, once the current offensive taking place as we speak in the south kind of starts to pull back because the Ukrainians haven't made the breakthrough they were hoping for. The Russians can effectively throw a huge amount of armor down there and push right down from Mykolaiv, right around the coast, and try and take Odessa. That's the big goal. They can do that. They'd happily walk home and call it a day from there, because it would create Ukraine to become a landlocked nation. It would give Russia all the gas that's discovered in the Black Sea around that area, and it would. That's it. Like, Ukraine really has to retreat to less defensible places. But at that point, you have to then take Mykolaiv, which means crossing the Bug River, which means crossing rivers further up as well. Very difficult for the Russians, and they even when the Ukrainians weren't as dug in, they couldn't do it. It would also mean taking Odessa, and having a staff member in Odessa at the moment, and for getting frequent reports, it's very, very well fortified. Even the road going around the coast from sort of Mykolaiv down to Odessa is filled with anti-tank stuff, filled with nasty ordnance. So it's very difficult for the Russians to even envision taking Odessa. But that would be the sort of like what Russia would love to do. What the Russians seem to be doing, though, is going with a much cheaper war. So in those first month of the war, it was very expensive. The Russians are burning through somewhere, depending on who you ask, like somewhere between $1 and $10 million a day. And they're not again, Russia's economy is the size of Australia's. It's not a big economy. They were losing men, losing operational materials, losing missiles. It wasn't long-term feasible. So they've scaled back to effectively the same kind of operations they ran in Grozny and Syria and other places, which is just artillery. And again, I think I brought this up last time on the show, but a Russian colonel telling me that car parks can't fight back. It's very easy to conquer car parks, right, which means we can just artillery everything, turn it to rubble, and we'll walk over the top of it, which is effectively what the Russians are doing at the moment. All these cities in particularly sort of in Donetsk and right in the east, they're just shelling the hell out of, because they've got so many of these old artillery shells lying around that they can just bomb them. And the Ukrainians are stuck in a bit of an odd position, because you have these cities like Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, which are, there's not really any strategic benefit in being there. They're not, crucial cities to the Ukrainian defense. But if the Ukrainians were to but the whole world's watching them. And if Ukraine starts retreating to more defensible positions like Zaporozhye and further back, then the world's going to go, oh, well, Ukraine's in full retreat. The battle's over. Let's stop sending money. So Ukraine has to defend this territory that, is probably not the best defensible territory. And they're just losing, I don't want to say the exact figure because, it's very disputed, but they're losing, a good chunk of men every day just to the churn of artillery, just by shelling, shell. And this is a bit of a problem, because Ukraine knows that the countdown timer is ticking. The end of fighting season is very quickly coming up. Ukraine in about October-ish becomes a bit of a muddy nightmare. With a concept called the Rasputitsa, which effectively means everything turns to mud. So it makes fighting really difficult. Any big offense, it slows any big offensives down, because you're stuck on asphalt roads. You can't, sweep around and go through villages because your tank will bog. You also know that the US midterms are coming up, and the US is not going to care about, effectively Ukraine as much. The midterms are in full swing. They know the US public will not be paying attention. We've also got the big countdown clock, which is winter. Right now in Europe, and particularly in the UK and all these sort of European countries, we are seeing the highest gas prices that they've ever had. And this is the time of year when gas is usually at a record low. Most gas is 3 times higher in winter than it is in summer. So the gas price is expected to be absolutely astronomical by the time winter hits. And this is going to be a bit of a problem because you've got all these economies coming out of the pandemic and hoping that their economies would get back, get some consumer flow going, particularly going into Christmas. And they're going to hit this sort of, the November statistics will come out and they'll likely say that there's not a lot of retail there because the gas price is so high. So people are spending more of their money on gas. And they go, okay, we really need to get the economy going. And then they'll start to nudge Ukraine to end the war. Like, look, buddy, we love you, but we need the war to win so we can get our gas prices back down. And that's a real worry for Ukraine, is that a lot of these European nations will start to go either make it a frozen conflict so we can all get back to it, or end the war. All whilst Russia will be sitting there running ads saying, if Russia was to be allowed to send you gas, we could turn the pipelines on tomorrow and we could lower your gas price to exactly what it was pre-war. To which the principled of us, the people who really stand with Ukraine, would say, "Yep, no problem. I'm willing to suffer that cost." But there are a lot of families out there who are not going to be willing to take that cost because it will be a very high cost, and to anyone who's paycheck to paycheck, they probably will have to buckle at that point.
Wow.
It's a really, really tough countdown clock going. So I think Russia at this point knows that the best hope they can have is that the rest stop paying attention. And just accept that the war will drag on to a frozen kind of conflict like we see in Transnistria or South Ossetia or Abkhazia or even Nagorno-Karabakh.
It's interesting. First of all, I never heard the term fighting season used before. It's like a football season, baseball season, basketball season. I get it that it's harder to fight when Mother Nature is not on your side, but I've never heard it put in those terms before. Fighting season.
It's actually really common, particularly in Middle East. It's in Afghanistan. It was really common because there were seasons where all the fighters would actually go home and mostly tend to farms and go home and do stuff.
That would be good to know. Back.
So it was, the US could almost, with precision, they'd be like, okay, cool. This is about the time of year. We've had the weather. Yep. Okay. They would have harvested by now. We're going to see the Taliban resurge in about 3 weeks' time.
Right. Almost like an undeclared ceasefire or a ceasefire declared by Mother Nature.
Yeah. It doesn't end the fighting, but it makes it much harder to launch offensives. So people tend to just bunker in for that particular period. So you'll find leave passes quite often when Afghanistan was sort of based around fighting season.
Yeah, if you're a person who's scared of the bombs falling, you're looking forward to that time of year.
Exactly. Get a bit of a break over harvest, effectively, is what it is.
Right. So I guess the skinny of that answer is it's not going to be a Vietnam. It's not going to be a 20-year thing, in your opinion. It's going to. There is a finite. Could be.
So it could grind to effectively a frozen conflict. So where we have in Moldova, which I guess the best way to explain it would be, imagine the US where Canada, when the US declared its independence, Maine said, no, I'm part of Canada. And the Canadians sent in troops and occupied Maine. The US still has its borders, but Maine believes it's part of Canada, has currency that is Canadian, and wants to be part of Canada, and will forever never recognize Washington as it's where its capital is.
Right.
That's effectively what you have in places like Moldova, where you have breakaway republics that are very Russia aligned, have Russian troops in there, but they're still technically a part of Moldova. But if you ask them, they're really not. So it's you could end up with a breakaway, effectively a Novorossiya, or a sort of like breakaway Ukrainian state that is pro-Russia, is Russian. There'll be a de facto border. The UN will say it's part of Ukraine, but for all intents and purposes, it'll be part of Russia.
Wow. But the magnitude of the war and the spending of like $10 million a day or whatever, they can't sustain that for 20 years, right? That's impossible.
Well, they don't need to at that point. So Russia spends incredibly little on running these breakaway republics in Georgia and Moldova, because the fighting stops. We end up in this kind of ceasefire, and where neither side really wants to go into it. So Moldova, knows that if it were to go and try and retake Transnistria, the Russians would come and defend Transnistria and then have to do that fight. But the Transnistrians also know they don't have enough strength to go into Moldova. So they both kind of just live in this de facto situation where there's a border.
I get that. I get it all. But the reason I'm saying that is because my comparison to Vietnam is way off, because the Vietnam stuff, we never stopped spending money. We never stopped being actively at war. there until the
Yeah,
very end.
if it were to go down to if it would go down to that scenario, it would be you'd have to keep a couple of Russian divisions in there to keep it all the civilians kept down. You'd have to do a few things, but the spending would be much lower, and in fact, the Russians would be able to take the resources out of those areas. So there is arguments that it could even be a profit for the Russians.
Got it.
So yeah, it's very different to Vietnam, and it could end up frozen. But again, it's just as likely to Ukraine willing to fight this forever. It really just depends on how the next 6 months go. Really, whether it ends up with again, Transnistria became a breakaway republic in '92, and we're still in that situation. South Ossetia, Abkhazia, 2008 is when they pretty much got to the situation they are at the moment. There were obviously breakaways before that. So these things can last for absolute decades. And again, it depends on really the next few months.
Well, you're one of the smartest people and most well-informed people that I know, and you don't have a crystal ball. And this is part of the problem that gives people anxiety, is not knowing, not being able to really make a prediction about these kind of things. Because you want to say, well, there's smart people that know. The average dope like me wants to believe that somebody is on top of this thing and really has a good handle on what's going on, and then I hear you talking, I'm like, he doesn't have a better grasp on where this might end or how it might end than any of us.
So we've spoken with entire, on the show we've had, entire commanders of entire theaters. We've had the head of NATO on, we've had, presidents of countries on, and 9 times out of 10, the further you get up that chain and you ask them, hey, what's your feeling? And they go, it depends, or it's very complicated. We have 3 options and varying rates of probability. Here is the most probable one, but no one can ever decide. It really is.
That's very much Vietnamish.
Yeah. The further you get up the chain, the more you get it's complicated. It depends. We'll get, we'll have to do an investigative study to give you 4 reports, and we don't know which ones are actually the correct one. It really is the answer to every geopolitical question is it's complicated.
It's complicated. Now, I haven't followed, and it's not covered that clearly. But what I'm hearing, and I want to get some clarity from you on this, that Putin or whoever Putin has in charge of his, they're actually forcing nuclear reactors to leak radiation. Is that true? And if so, doesn't it hurt the Russian troops that are invading just as much as it does talk to me about that.
So it's not so the leaking radiation is a bit of a misnomer. So when they talk about the numbers that they're seeing there, like, we've seen it as sort of 1.4, 1.8 Rungen. It's actually really common that most cities do have that anyway, particularly cities with marble are mostly going to be like 2 Rungen anyway. So that's a bit of a misnomer. So that's mostly just the press fanaticizing that one. What the Russians are doing is threatening that they can blow up some of the nuclear power plants that they have under the Russian occupation at the moment. And it's a twofold thing. One, by sending out these messages to say, hey, we're going to bomb it tomorrow. If the Russians were going to bomb it, they would bomb it. But if they give them a day's notice, it actually gives the Ukrainians time or the operators time to turn the reactors off, to lock the water away, to get this thing back into a state where it is just effectively, dirty water. If you strike a nuclear power plant when it's in full operation, you do risk meltdown. If you turn the reactor off and you hit it, it's very unlikely to melt down. So it does give, if they're going to do it, this kind of like, no one come to work tomorrow, please shut the plant down, is probably a what needs to be done. Because again, it would, particularly when the threat was going on, I was pointing out to everyone was asking me going, they do know the wind's going south toward the Russian front lines, right? That'll immediately irradiate all of them. But what the desired audience for that is the West, is effectively is Western and Central Europe. Because they are, again, the guys that will push Ukraine to end the war. And these guys are now going, oh shit, what if Putin's crazy and he does this nuclear power plant and it completely irradiates all of Poland and Italy and Slovakia and Bulgaria and all these other countries? Shit, we better get this war over with before he goes crazy. Which is kind of that's the message you're trying to get across. Right. If he was going to do it, he would have done it, but it doesn't make any strategic sense to attack it. Frankly, those nuclear power plants are still powering some of the stuff that the Russians are using. So I don't see I don't see that happening at all. But it does, to the Western press who really picked up on the story And it was really interesting to see that a lot of the tweets that got leaked, a lot of the texts that got leaked, were in English, because they wanted as much Western press to pick this up as possible, because they want to try and scare the Central Europeans into convincing Ukraine to sort of give up the war.
The Western press is not cooperating too much, though, or because we got our, everybody is just like, so U.S. domestic politics is taking over the news and all that stuff. Jamie's reading my mind because the rumors about Putin's health, and we hear two conflicting stories about that. He's dying of cancer. No, he's fine. He's perfectly healthy. Anywhere, maybe right in the middle. Maybe he's got a cold. Maybe he's got COVID. How is Putin? And if he dies tomorrow, Jamie's question: if he dies tomorrow, would still be an appetite for war?
So it really depends. So the Putin being sick thing is something that has been talked about for years. A friend of mine put together a clip of the news saying, "Oh, he's going to die. He's got cancer," and showing like every year they've been saying that, and it's a very common thing. Because and that's the thing, he locks himself away in a bunker quite often, to the point where when he does these kind of like, "Hey, I'm still with school children," it's mostly like staff from his office rather than actual teachers, because he really doesn't like interacting with many people at the moment. So it's very hard to actually get a good health assessment on him, because he isn't making public appearances all that much, apart from a trip to Central Asia in the last few weeks. Even then, he kind of flew in, did his thing, and flew out. But if he dies, it's it really isn't completely sure who would take his position, because if it's someone who is a Putin loyalist, particularly guys from the FSB or guys from the GRU, who are probably the most likely to take the throne after him, that would end up with someone who would be even more pro-war, or would even be even more gung-ho. And when Putin ran the sort of day before the war, 2 days before the war, one of the two, depending on your time zone, he ran this sort of like amazing meeting where he asked every one of his sort of inner circle, the Siloviki, do you approve of going into Ukraine? And one by one they went, yeah, sure. And the one guy who said no, he went, speak up, don't stutter. And he went, oh yes, sir, I agree with going to Ukraine. Which again, we all laughed at the time, but it kind of is a suicide pact. Because if any of these guys were to try and take over after Putin and say, I would never supported the war, then all the clips come out at saying, well, yeah, you did. You're on camera saying you did. You went on live television and said you support the war. So it's a bit of you'd either have to clean the entire sort of upper echelons of Russian power out, which includes, the head of the oil companies and the power companies and the telecom companies, who, again, right now, if you are head of Gazprom or one of these sort of major Russian companies, you're likely getting a very good deal from Putin. You're getting kickbacks, and you'll go, well, if a new guy comes into power, am I going to get the same kickbacks? Probably not. So you're either going to back Putin or back whoever Putin will get, will come in and support and do exactly what Putin's doing, or you're going to lose a bunch of money. And that's kind of why he's built this oligarchy around him. So if he does die, it's just as likely we're going to end up with someone bad, if not worse, except less predictable. As for support for the war, it really depends on where you are. The rural areas seem to be actually quite supportive of it. The inner city doesn't seem to be very supportive, but again, it really just depends on how it's framed. So we might be able to say, okay, yeah, well, Putin died, let's have a bit of a ceasefire. And then, the Russians will not accept, hey, let's just leave Ukraine, because it'll be the same. Everyone will be having Afghanistan flashbacks at that point. So the Russians may just go, okay, well, you're not agreeing to let's call a line here. Ukraine will say no. And Russia goes, well, Ukraine's unreasonable. Let's keep the war going. It's a really difficult situation. And Putin's, everyone wishing for a Putin heart attack it's not going to solve your problem. It's a fresh coat of paint on the same terrible truck.
I get that. Well, a part of that, the hostage situation where the bureaucrats are held hostage to a death threat. I think there's some forgiveness there, even if there's clips of them saying you supported the war, whatever. We again, Vietnam is the only thing I really know about. Obviously, we forgave the vets who were on camera, cursing the United States while they were hostage. There's a little bit of that. I don't know. But there's also, and again, coming back to the Vietnam stuff, part of that war was protracted because we were just too prideful to accept defeat. And is that some of the case with Russia? They're just too prideful to accept that maybe this was a bad idea. We're not winning anything over there. Maybe there's a better way to get a hold of the gas cheaper or whatever they went in there for, the resources they went in there for. Maybe there's a better way that's not going to cost them as much and not be in the long run, as harmful to the country as it could be. I don't know.
Again, it is a complete pride thing. Much like the US pulling out of Afghanistan, Afghanistan had been a lost cause. It was never going to work for probably, depending on who you are, somewhere between 2003 and 2008. By that point, there was never going to work. And when we did a last thing on Afghanistan, I remember describing it as this kind of, imagine if someone had accidentally bumped into a cabinet and this plate had fallen, on the glass door. If you open the door, that plate's immediately going to smash. You'd then smash the plate. But if you keep the door closed, well, technically it's not smashed. But the moment you open it up, it smashes.
Right.
Whoever, it didn't matter who was going to pull it out of Afghanistan. It was done. It was going to go wrong. It was already a bad ploy. So if you are, Obama, who was, let's get out of Afghanistan, sir, it will completely, ruin your reputation. You'll never win the midterms, and we'll never get anything passed. Okay, we'll kick the can down the road. And Trump would probably have the same meeting, and Biden, he pulled the trigger on it because effectively Trump had already negotiated what they're going to do. For the Russians, they pulled out of Afghanistan in 85. 89, sorry. And it was such a, terrible moment for the Russians, because when it ended, a lot of the secrecy around how many casualties came out. And at that point, it really did shake a lot of faith in the Soviets that all the war crimes came home, because all the soldiers that had been kept, in the field to not, talk to friends and family came home and actually went, yeah, we were doing some real horrible things in Afghanistan. And all the casualties became public, to which everyone went, well, why were we there? Losing all these Russian soldiers in a war that we lost to Afghanistan? How are we the greatest power and the second greatest power, or greatest power in the world, losing to Afghanistan? It did shake a lot of faith in the Russian system at that point, or the Soviet system, should I say. So yes, there is a lot of pride in this, and much like the US, if effectively Kennedy had run out with his, if Kennedy or Johnson had run out, before Tonkin and said, let's get out, we're never going to win this, it would have been a real, damage to the sort of US reputation, or to their political reputation to do that. Yeah. Do I think that's a justification to stay in there for 20 years? Probably not. But yeah, I think pride will definitely play a role in this.
All right. Now, this morning's episode on the Red Line podcast is about Pakistan, and I do want to get to that. But because you mentioned Afghanistan, about a couple of weeks ago, you did a episode on Afghanistan, and the word Al Qaeda kept coming up. We don't hear that word in the U.S. anymore. We were led to believe that Al Qaeda was gone, replaced by ISIS. Lately, we've been talking about Afghanistan because of the anniversary, and talking about the Taliban coming back in and taking over Afghanistan. But Al Qaeda are they the ruling group now in Afghanistan, or is it the Taliban, or is it the Taliban taking orders from the Al Qaeda? What the hell is going on in Afghanistan?
Afghanistan is a bit of a mess and a bit of a not mess at the moment. It's very, very odd situation for everything. So effectively, the Taliban are in control and in government at the moment. And in some ways, they're better than they were in 2001, and others, they're just as bad as they were in 2001. But they're stuck in a few really odd positions. So one, if the Taliban were to fall apart at the moment, it would likely be ISIS who would take the reins. They are the sort of ISIS-K, particularly in the West, are a force to be reckoned with. Not enough to take the country, but if the US were to completely go, no, we'll never deal with the Taliban and we'll let this country fall apart. Yep, they've given away a somewhat reasonable Taliban for an absolutely fanatic ISIS, which is just, it's like lighting yourself on fire to get rid of a paper cut. It's not the solution
right
here. But you also have problems like, for instance, the FBI still has warrants out for the man who is currently the Afghan state secretary, effectively equivalent of Secretary of State. So, how can you be like, hey, $10 million for his arrest? And everyone's going, he's at the press conference at the Hilton. What are you talking about? He's right. He's there. It's little things that, are real problems at the moment, like Afghan shops and food stores are actually full of food. But because the US banking sanctions are still on, no one can take any money out. So no one can pay for the food. So everyone's going hungry. And it's a really delicate action because at one hand you have, okay, we need to make sure Afghanistan actually remains stable. It doesn't fall apart. And we need to make sure it is, a somewhat functioning nation. But that would require releasing all the banking sanctions and giving the Taliban a bunch of money. Because again, the budget they're talking with is, what the last budget they released for the entire country was $500 million, which is what the US spends on a handful of bridges. It really is a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of money. So, do you let it collapse and an even worse administration comes out? No, you don't want to, but you also don't want to fund the Taliban because, again, there's some really bad actors in there. As for the Taliban, they're also stuck in a bit of a problem. You've got some factions of the Taliban who are very, why do we fight this war? We fought this to get rid of the imperialists. We fought this to, bring in a full, very Islamic, very Sharia, go down the whole hog. And, you can argue and go, yeah, they did fight that war to do that. And the other half go, yeah, but we kind of need money to come in and no country wants to do business with us while we're crazy. So let's actually act reasonable. Because again, there's a lot of countries who would like to do mining in Afghanistan or build pipelines through Afghanistan, but they're not going to do that whilst the Taliban is really rickety. So you have the other half of the Taliban who are, wearing a suit and tie and trying to be very, very well behaved and going to China and India and all these other countries saying, look, we are not the Taliban of 01. We're reasonable people. We're an Islamic government, but just treat us like Saudi Arabia and we'll be happy to have your business. And that's the US has two dichotomies fighting and the Taliban have two dichotomies fighting. And it's a really interesting balancing act, and it's all going wrong.
They need to rebrand. They need to take a marketing lesson and just change the name from Taliban to something different and present it that way.
You had the Taliban, now try the Teleglam. That's the strategy here.
Yes.
But again, then the whole other factions are going to be like, well, why do we fight the war for 20 years? Okay, yeah, sure.
Well, part of the concern and part of what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago was women's rights, because while the U.S. was invading, women's lives in Afghanistan improved drastically, and now what I'm hearing anyway. Again, I just rely on what people tell me is that it's taken a complete step back. It's worse than it was before the United States actually invaded it for women under the Taliban. Now it's worse than it was before we invaded, and that's a human rights issue, but it doesn't seem to be one that people are willing to make a big deal about at this point. It's just weird. Like, yeah, a complete annihilation of women's rights, but you know what? Let's just look the other way for now.
So, even women's rights is a really, really interesting one, because you've got, when the Soviets and the communist government were in place in Afghanistan, women had, 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 rights. And again, it really depended on where you're in the country, because whilst the Soviets could hold on to Kabul and the major cities, they really didn't have a lot of grip on their very outer territories. When the Taliban come in before the US invasion, women's rights went right down to the bottom of the floor. And that's where it was. The US came in, and yes, whilst Kabul had, all the women's rights and everything else, far out bits, but particularly in the South, really didn't. It really depended on how much influence the US had. And it was, it became almost, this country of, if you lived in cities, you had this thing. And if you left the city limits, well, we're back to what it was pre-US invasion. We are seeing more women's rights at the moment, than what we had before the US invasion. Not as much as during the US occupation. But again, it's that dichotomy of, you've got, in Kabul, women have, not good rights, but better rights than they had in other bits of the country. Whereas in the sort of southern bits, and particularly the western bits, far worse. It's a really bad situation for women. But it's that balancing act of, okay, well, great, let's really make a big deal about the women, but that's never going to pass through Afghan parliaments, or never going to pass through Afghan government, because again, you've got the hardliners in there. But again, women are still getting education, they are doing stuff, but The Afghans probably aren't doing that out of the goodness of their heart, but more hey, we're a reasonable country. Please give us some money and do business inside of us.
Yeah, we want to do business. We want to remain open for business. So it's that's politics in a nutshell.
Yes.
Pakistan. What the hell's going on in Pakistan?
Lots is going on in Pakistan. Yeah, we had a few episodes. Just like because obviously we're doing lots of live panels and stuff. So this week, I think we've done a big 90-minute piece on Pakistan, a big piece on aircraft carriers becoming obsolete. I know we're doing Ukrainian cyber war next, so it's very busy back at where we are. Pakistan. So Pakistan had a guy we'll go back a little bit further. Pakistan has kind of had these two families that have, the Sharifs and the Bhuttos have kind of just like bounced back and forth on they run the country. And now you've had this guy named Imran Khan come in. Now he is he's very pro-Islamic. He's not far crazy, but he's somewhat reasonable. He's an ex-cricketer. He's, educated in Britain, very fresh breath of air for Pakistani politics. He had a no confidence vote, and effectively all the old guard as well as the military have kicked him out of power. And now it's in this really interesting place of, well, if Imran Khan is he's rallying and saying this is a US coup, I was kicked out of power, this is not supposed to be. A lot of Pakistanis you ask will say, well, I'm kind of happy he was out. The country's in a really bad economic spot. Inflation's at 29%. It's rough. The country's going through its worst floods they've ever seen at the moment. So yeah, like it was not great. Anyone who was prime minister at the time was going to get kicked out regardless. The other half will say he was a breath of fresh air, but it's rather than sort of Pakistani politics, which usually is okay, I lost, goodbye. See, I'm going to go to the backbench now. It's now a guy pulling the elections, this is all rigged. The system's against me. We need to rally. We need to take this on. And that's tearing apart, a lot of internal Pakistani politics, particularly in the north and south. And again, Pakistan is a very odd nation because unlike, a lot of nations which are almost a hegemonic kind of understanding of a nation, Pakistan is really kind of four nations smashed together. And Baluch in the south and all the Kashmiris in the north don't really feel like Islamabad is all that close with them at the moment. Add to that, and Afghanistan falling apart right next door. India's getting bigger and bigger and more stronger militarily. And China is starting to pull their investments out of Pakistan. They're just not getting the return they thought, particularly in Baluchistan, where some of their investments are under attack. Locals are attacking the Chinese investments. It's a real rough time for Pakistan. And this is just adding a whole other level of domestic problems on top of all the other international problems.
I understand about India becoming bigger, I don't know, more powerful. But to me, India and Pakistan have always been close to at war or wanting to be at war. That's always like, I wish we were at war. So does that embolden them and think, well, Pakistan's looking really divided at this moment. Maybe this is a good time, or am I just like, that's just my paranoia thinking?
So India and Pakistan is a really interesting conflict because both of them have nuclear weapons now. Having war in Kashmir or shooting a couple of bullets at each other here and there happens all the time. Having, a couple of shells happens all the time. But the moment, for Pakistan particularly, once the Indians, let's say, cross the border and start running towards Islamabad, you'll hit this sort of gap in the mountains before you hit Islamabad. And Pakistan will only have about 30 Ks to decide, okay, once the Indians get their tanks through that gap, they're into us and they can take Islamabad. And they will know that there will be meetings inside Islamabad going, Mr. Prime Minister, the Indians are going to be taking Islamabad. It's a now or never. They know where most of our nukes are. If we launch now, we can probably get most of theirs before they get us. And the Indians will have the exact same meeting on the other side. The moment someone crosses the border, it then becomes a countdown to, okay, who launches nukes? And at what point do they launch nukes? Because if you're the Prime Minister of Pakistan, you go, well, okay, they've just invaded the border, not time to use nukes. Okay, well, when do we? Oh, when they get near Islamabad, we'll do it. And if they do, congrats, you've now started a nuclear war in South Asia. It's a really, really careful set of equations that have to be done. And all whilst you are having people in your ear going, we know where most of their nukes are. We can probably get them first if we launch first. And the other side's having the same conversation.
How do you sleep at night?
Usually after a few vodkas or red wines, and with
Well, because we've just discussed 3 or 4 places on this planet, and all of them seem like a complete clusterfuck of there's no real solution that can work for, and that's just 3 of the many places on the planet. Lately, I've had a series of guests talking about sustainability and is there enough? Is there enough in the world with 7 billion working towards 8 billion people on the planet? And every one of the experts that I talk to who have written books about the sustainability are optimists for the world and think we can resolve these issues if we kind of change our minds. I'm like, you're crazy. We can't get people to agree on left and right or day and night or any of that kind of stuff. So, seeing you and knowing what you know and deal with every day and learn about every day, you can't be an optimist on the level that those guys are, can you?
I'm optimistic at some things. I think
How?
we are. Oh, I drink. But no, and I think we haven't nuked each other yet. I think one of the really interesting sort of question about nuclear warfare, particularly, is that in the end it will have to be a person pushing the big red button. And when we've come really close, for instance, in '83 during Able Archer, which was an exercise Reagan ran, the Soviets thought, oh, that's it. This is Reagan nuking us, and people didn't launch the nukes. When US accidentally bombed a submarine off the coast of Cuba, the Russians thought they were under attack. They should have launched the nukes. The captain said, I don't think so. Didn't launch the nukes. Truman, who at one point had nuclear weapons, the Russians didn't, was told that, a couple of these things, we can knock the Soviets out before they get big, didn't launch the nukes. I think, as much as, we are in this really weird geopolitical position, people, you still have to have a person push the big red button. And that is I hope to God enough to get us through some of the problems. But yeah,
even without the nuclear threat, though, there's still the, you hear 29% inflation. I mean, God, how long do people sustain that before they get hungry? And hungry people are desperate people, and that's when chaos really ensues. And that's just, again, we've only talked about a couple of places on the planet, and it doesn't seem there are people who believe that, and especially in this country, that overpopulation is not a problem. We need to populate the planet more. It's like, what the hell? Where are we going with this? So being an optimist is a really difficult thing for me. I mean, even if I drink and and I mean, there's not enough substance that can make me. This is why a lot of people tune out, because it is so stressful to hear about all these kinds of things.
It is, there is nothing worse than sitting in a 6-hour briefing and getting this whole rundown on who the players are, what the situation is, and at the end everyone looks at each other and goes, so there's no solution to this,
right? And part of it, like what has been apparent in this conversation, is there are so you get presented with all this data from different experts who are going to help you make a decision, but there's never an easy decision about anything, because everything is so intertwined, interconnected to fallout. Or if we do this, that'll be positive in some respects, but there's always a negative side of everything. There's never an easy choice.
It never is. Again, if it's an easy choice, people would have done it. It's things like going back to our earlier conversation about Afghanistan. You're going to have 2 people in that room one of them is going to say, sir, you are giving money to the Taliban. And the other is going to say, sir, without giving money to the Taliban, you're letting ISIS take the country. These are real geopolitical decisions that, again, both of those decisions are right and wrong. There is no clean decisions to be made in this theater.
That gives me some forgiveness or respect for Putin. He likes yes men, and I can understand why. Don't anybody argue with me. Life is easier when nobody's arguing. One more question for you, and I'll let you go. This is not world news, but it's from one of my and he will be with me tomorrow, a comedian who will be guest hosting tomorrow. Michael, help me understand why Australia is against felons when they used to be a prison state. I think I would know how to answer that, but how would you answer that?
Oh. I can't even know how to answer that. It's felons. In what respect? It was in we don't allow felons in, as in we're very anti-crime.
Anti-crime, I guess, is well. I'll just give you a little background on William. William did 10 years in prison for robbing a flower shop.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Yep. Okay.
But the way I would answer that is, New York and the area that I'm from was heavily built upon mob, whether it was the Irish mob, the Irish mafia, or the Italian mafia. But we wanted to get rid of that. It's not like just because we started there, we didn't want to keep that way of life, and we did everything we could to kind of combat that. Just because your past is built upon something doesn't mean you have to stick with it, especially if it's criminal behavior and stuff. That's how I would answer that.
See, it's really interesting. So I work mostly with US people all the time. And crime in Australia versus crime in the US is a very, very different kettle of fish. So let's say something like a gun death, someone actually shooting someone with a gun is a big news story over here. It happens very rarely. It's not a big thing. It's a different kettle of fish. When they're like, we found the world's biggest supply of ecstasy and cocaine, and it's 3 bags. You're like, oh, okay, that's what Brazil kind of does in the morning. Like, what are you talking about? It's some of it is really like, white collar crime, financial crime, absolutely ballistically big in Australia. Petty crime, it's really odd. For instance, the biggest, the US has drug mules that get stuff across the US border and into the country. The biggest peddler of drugs in Australia is the Australian Post Office, because we're that odd that the drug dealers have realized how easy for Australia, and they'll just package everything inside random packages coming from other countries like China and Thailand and whatnot, going, the post office will get 1 in 100 and the other 99 get through. It's that kind of a crime is very odd here because it's not as supercharged as places like the US or Mexico or Brazil are, but there's still crime, and financial crime particularly is very big over here.
Yeah, nobody's going to jail for robbing flower shops in Australia, I guess.
No, you can probably go to jail that, but again, they're a little more lenient on a lot of things over here. It's you robbing a flower shop, you'd probably likely get community service, or
I don't know how they would without a gun. How would you go into a flower shop? And
I think that's he comes in with a pair of secateurs, and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, actually, are you the work experience kid? Right, come on in." I don't think I've robbed a flower shop.
I question him about that.
Where's Jimmy? He's pushing up daisies. Where's Jimmy's pushing up daisies? He's dead. Yeah. No, he's just pushing up daisies. Sorry, I'm so sorry if he's.
I know. Listen, it's been a very confusing. Not confusing.
I feel like every time I come onto your show, it's at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's a nice little relaxing morning, and I just smack you with a 2x4 of depression.
Well, it's overwhelming to think, but it's important to remind ourselves that because we are so overwhelmed here with U.S. domestic shit that we think that there's nothing else going on in the world, and people don't even realize we never take a second to think about Yemen or Pakistan or even Saudi Arabia, who we're giving nuclear secrets to. God, any of these kind of things that are going on in the world, and it's important to remind people.
Try being the rest of the world where we have our own problems, but we have to watch your problems as well.
Right. No.
Because again, Australia follows US politics more closely than their own. When they asked Australians who the deputy prime minister is, it's which is our vice president effectively. Less than half of Australians know who the deputy PM is. Whereas when you ask them, like US election time, they're like, well, Maricopa County is 42% Latino, so you'd assume that's probably going to go to the Democrats. We follow your politics far closer than ours.
I know. I've had a lot of guests on from Australia, and almost all of them end up talking about Trump at some point. It's like, wow, I guess he's as big over there as he is over here. I mean,
there are some people who wear the "Make America Great Again" hats over here, and you're like, but why? You're here. What are you talking about?
That's
we had one. The weirdest one though. We had one candidate run in the Queensland Senate, who his slogan was to build a wall around Australia to keep the immigrants out. To which everyone went, "Hey, dude, we're an island.
Isn't the Pacific Ocean a big enough wall? I mean,
it's pretty difficult to get across that. Yeah. So
wow.
yeah, it's U.S. politics really does seep into what we do over here. But yeah, it's always interesting.
Well, Michael, it's been a pleasure. The Red Line Podcast. Got to have the in there when you look. If you just put in Red Line Podcast on Google, you'll find it.
It comes up.
TheRedLinePodcast.com. Go there, subscribe, and we appreciate everybody who will do that and support Michael's work. And thank you for coming here, man. Have a great night. And,
you too. It's always an absolute pleasure. I have a few more interviews to talk about. Lots of all the depressing stuff. That's how we do things.
Come back in about a month. I'll get in touch with you, but please do, because I don't want to let. It's been like 3 or 4 months now. That's too long.
Anytime. You've got my Twitter, so you can just hit me up, and I'll always make time for you, mate.
Appreciate it. Thank you, man. Be well.
Sounds good. Talk soon.
Michael Hilliard, folks. Is your head spinning like mine's spinning? I feel a little less electrocuted right now. I could tell you that. More to think about. The Pakistan stuff is definitely concerning to me, because that's always been the area where I personally thought if World War III is going to start, that's the area where we're looking at it. And what do I know? But I've always had that gut feeling that because, like in this country, in the Western world, even though Pakistan and India both have nuclear capabilities, we still think of them as third world countries in a lot of ways. But the population and the amount of people they have there and the amount of disparity in wealth. You have very rich people, you have poor people who will fucking washing their clothes in the Ganges River and drinking from the same water where they shit and wash clothes and all that kind of stuff. It's sewage, extreme disparity, all that kind of stuff. That becomes a tinderbox for a lot of people. So anyway, good talk. I'm going to have a lot of thinking to do to try to sort some of it out. I'm going to go get a fresh cup of coffee right now. I want to tell you that this morning's program is brought to you by Coa Coffee. Coa Coffee, the best coffee in the whole goddamn world. Oh, I shouldn't say goddamn, should I? The whole damn world. No, the whole world. How about just the whole world? I'm feeling a little more electrocuted now. Maybe I'll go electrocute myself while I get a fresh cup of coffee. Coa Coffee, I'll be right back. Enjoy the commercial. This episode is brought to you by Coa Coffee. If you are a coffee connoisseur and want to experience the best coffee Hawaii has to offer, no blends, no compromise, try the true taste of aloha. Coa Coffee produces premium Hawaiian coffee, hand-picked, expertly roasted, and delivered from Hawaii to your door with aloha. From award-winning 100% Kona coffee grown on the slopes of the Mauna Loa volcano to the unique mocha beans of Maui, they strive to provide their loyal customers with the best quality and freshness. Since 1997, Coa Coffee has been known far and wide as a product of utmost quality, and their awards prove it. Coa Coffee was featured in Forbes' Top 10 Coffees of the World. This is the coffee Forbes called the best coffee in America. Find out what it's all about. Go to minddogtv.com/coffee. No. I like to see the girl running on the beach. It's really the best part of the Coa Coffee commercial. If any of you guys want to just pop in for a moment and have a little chat, that would be cool. I'm going to send William a link right now. I don't know if he's still with us and if he's still available, but if you guys want to just pop in, that would be cool. Got a few minutes to kill here before I say goodbye to Govs and then sign off for the day. And I'm kind of just now recapping if we can. The basic gist of what we learned this morning is the world is going to come to an end very shortly in a disastrous catastrophe of chaos, hunger, floods, famine, nuclear war, and a party. And we'll have a party. Yeah, that's fine, Jamie. Whatever. If you're busy, you're busy. I don't know if William's still with me, or with us even, still listening. He might have got a little upset with me still continuing to just bust his balls about going to jail for, flower shop robbing. No, I came away with a dozen roses. It's not a bank. That's all I'm saying. You go where the money is. If I'm going to go to jail for 10 years, probably the penalty for bank robbery is more than 10 years, right? But if I'm going to go to jail for robbing, it's going to be attempt to get money. I mean, not flowers. Obviously, there's going to be some money in a flower shop, gas station type money, not bank type money. I got a gub. I think people get away with robbing banks more than we are led to believe. I think a lot of bank robbers get away with it. It's true. I don't think people attempt bank robbery as often as they do. Interesting story for me, maybe not for you, but I'm here to entertain myself. That same trip to California in 1997, I think it was 97. I should look this up. I think it was either 97 or 98. It was February. I know that. Let me see. Hold on. I'll get to the bottom of this right away. I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out to be 90. When was it? When was it? Because there is a historical thing here. What's the date? Damn it. 97, February of 97. That same trip for the House of Blues where, Hey, I'm Not Bruce, that story. Remember that one? We got to LA. We were doing a show at the Beverly Wilshire, and we got there. We got into town a week before the cult, or a full week. And generally, we'd only get there a day or two before the cult to get all the audiovisual equipment set up and all that stuff. This time we got there a week in advance, and our hotel room was not ready for us. We got to the Beverly Wilshire, and they said, the room's not ready. So we had to go get a cheap motel room, and we ended up going to North Hollywood to get a motel room in a very cheap area, the cheapest motel room we could get. We wake up the next morning, and there are sirens all over the place, and what sounds like good gunshots. Turn on the television, and directly across the street from us, there is a bank robbery in progress, and a bank robbery of bank robberies, of epic bank robberies, the most epic bank robbery ever. Two dudes with full body armor, pumped up with THC, a PCP, and like completely covered with automatic weapons, in the middle of a bank robbery, and the police show up, and they don't care. They are armed and protected with body armor, and police bullets are just bouncing off of them while they're wiping police out. Like hundreds of police are being held at bay by two guys, and bullets. We're in a motel room right across the street, and we get a warning: do not leave your room, and all this stuff, and nobody out on the street. Everybody locked down. Scary as shit. And bullets coming through the motel walls, through the windows and walls. Bullets being shot out on the street, and actually coming to. So we're laying on the floor, like trying not to get killed, but the TV's on because we're trying to see what's going on. Most epic bank robbery of all time. Now, both those guys ended up eventually after hours of standoff with the police, being taken out. I guess one guy got shot in the knee. There was a little gap in his body armor. Got shot in the knee, was taken down that way. Eventually, but it was a bloodbath. And they were just picking cops off like they were nothing. But those guys had gotten away at that point. They were on a spree. They had gotten away with robbing bank after bank after bank. This was the one that ended it all. But so my point about, I think, and we never heard about bank robbers getting away with it at the point. It wasn't new. They weren't in the news until they failed. So I do think that bank robbery is something that people get away with more often than we are led to believe when they actually try it. What's Kelly saying? If you wake up and choose violence, make sure you drink cold coffee. I'm not sure that's the best way to sell it, but if that works. I don't know if they were drinking cold coffee. No, they couldn't have been, because that was before cold coffee existed. That was 25 years ago, last February. It was the end week of February, but that was the same week of that whole I'm Not Bruce story. And there were a lot of stories from that trip. It's the same week that I was supposed to be on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and waited around, told everybody I was going to be on, and then they didn't use the footage. But coming back to the bank robberies, I do think, if you're going to rob something, and I'm not encouraging people to rob banks by any means, but if you're going to rob anything, and there's a flower shop here and there's a bank here, go for the bank. Go for the bank. That was the reason cold coffee was invented. Well, I could see if it was a Hawaiian bank, maybe, because cold coffee is grown on the slopes of the Mauna Loa volcano with aloha, in case you needed a little aloha. Anyway, I think, what bad man? What? Why? I was teasing with Jamie. He has a bad influence. No, Jamie, he's a very good boy. He's a good boy, Jamie. I'm gonna sneeze. You don't want to see me sneeze. I'll take myself out of the picture before I sneeze. I wanted to debut a song I wrote last night. I'm not going to do it. I have not recorded it yet. I wanted to debut it live, but you hear my voice is in the Shibali range right now. And I need to be a little more in the Pavarotti range. Not really. What is it? It's a country song, a corny country song about suicide. Yeah, you like a corny country song about suicide, do you? I got one for you, but I'm not going to debut it here today. Maybe I'll record it today and debut it tomorrow. Tomorrow, William Conway will be my guest host. I think he's already gone for the day, because he would have been here by now. He will be my guest host tomorrow. And Preston Williams, a comedian that he hooked up for tomorrow, will be the guest. So that should be an interesting one. Again, Michael Hilliard, Redline Podcast. Go there and subscribe if you want to know what's going on in the world. Michael obviously has a sense of humor because he drinks. And he's from Australia. And, so anyway, I'm saying goodbye to Govs right now. Goodbye, Govs. I'm taking you off the list. Now, this was not comedy. And if you tuned into Govs Comedy Podcast today and you saw this show, you might say, what the fuck? You got some Australian guy talking about Pakistan and Ukraine, and that's not funny. I had a few laughs. But then again, I've been electrocuted. So we're saying goodbye to Govs. Govs, you guys have a great rest of your day.